The last few days have been very stressful. I mean, ever since the Friday morning, when we noticed that the children were gone. Immediately jumped in the vehicle, surveyed all the areas, many dirt roads, many culverts as I could, and waited for the police to get there. Feels like I'm reliving a nightmare of May 2nd, but the main feelings from sadness have just turned to anger because there's no evidence as of after 1 month, and it's really taken a toll.
With the wet weather, it makes things a little more complicated for our searchers. Given they're in the woods, it's wet, things are slippery, footing's not the greatest. It's the water's it's not the best, but they're still trudging through and they're still working hard at doing the job that they have to do.
The mysterious disappearance of two young children, Lilly, age 7, and Jack Sullivan, age 4, quickly became a case that shocked not only their local community, but also drew massive attention across social media worldwide. As official information remained limited, speculation from the public only grew stronger. Some believe the children may have wandered off or suffered an accident. Others suggest a stranger may have abducted them. A few have even raised questions about the mother, wondering if there's something she hasn't fully disclosed. However, among all the circulating theories, one stands out as both prominent and highly controversial, that the stepfather was either the perpetrator or at the very least directly involved in the children's disappearance. This theory, notably, does not stem from any officially released evidence. Rather, it reflects a common pattern in missing persons cases, that the person closest to the victims is often the first to be scrutinized. That said, it's important to set the record straight. The stepfather has made multiple appearances in the media, cooperated fully with law enforcement, and provided statements as requested by investigators. He has not gone into hiding, as some online comments have inaccurately claimed. Still, his position within the family and the nature of the disappearance, no signs of forced entry, no witnesses, continue to invite public attention and speculation. As a true crime analysis channel committed to neutrality, we present today's episode as a theoretical exercise only, not to assign guilt, but to explore what might be worth further investigation if the rumors hold any weight. So we ask, if the stepfather was indeed involved, what could his motive have been? What would he gain or lose by taking action? And most importantly, do these widespread suspicions truly stand up to the principles of criminal investigation? If the theory that the stepfather was involved holds any truth, then one of the most common and plausible motives seen in domestic cases is financial pressure. In the wake of economic instability, rising living costs, and job insecurity, many families face mounting stress behind closed doors. In such circumstances, a step-parent who finds themselves responsible, formally or informally, for the care of two children not biologically their own may begin to perceive the situation as unsustainable. This is not to imply inherent malice, but in numerous case files, perpetrators were not cold-blooded killers from the outset. They were individuals pushed to emotional breaking points. A sense of helplessness, resentment, or entrapment can fester when obligations grow heavier and support systems weaken. The stepfather may not have had a deep emotional bond with Lilly and Jack. If the relationship with the children's mother placed added demands, whether financially, emotionally, or socially, he may have felt overwhelmed. In some dynamics, tension grows quietly, the mother focusing most of her attention on the children, disagreements over money, or a lack of shared responsibility. Over time, this imbalance can distort the thought process of someone under strain. In extreme cases, it leads to irrational conclusions such as, If the children weren't here, things would be easier. I'd be free. In several real-life cases, a financial motive did not begin with murderous intent. Rather, a series of escalating actions, shouting, threats, punishment, led to a tragic accident. The tragedy then spiraled further when the adult involved chose to conceal the incident instead of seeking help, creating the illusion of a disappearance. That said, it is important to clarify. As of now, there is no public evidence indicating that Lilly and Jack's stepfather was facing significant financial hardship, nor is there proof of abusive behavior toward the children. This is purely a theoretical analysis, grounded in behavioral patterns observed in similar cases. The goal of examining this potential financial motive is not to assign guilt, but to pose a critical question. If the stepfather were involved, could financial stress have played a role or contributed to a series of harmful decisions? A household without shouting, visible violence, or overtly dysfunctional behavior isn't necessarily a safe one. In many missing persons cases involving family members, the root cause is not a single moment of rage, but a slow-burning tension that no one notices, until it's too late. Conflict doesn't always explode. Sometimes it accumulates in silence like a hairline fracture deep within a home's foundation. If we consider the possibility that the stepfather was involved, then his position within the emotional structure of the family warrants closer analysis. As a man with no biological connection to Lilly and Jack, his role as a father figure did not begin with instinctive love, but with an assumed responsibility, one that came through his relationship with the children's mother. In many similar cases, a step-parent finds themselves both an outsider and an insider, expected to care as a parent, yet never fully accepted as one. If the emotional bond between the stepfather and the children was fragile or distant, that emotional distance, perhaps once just awkwardness, can slowly evolve into irritation, resentment, or even quiet hostility. Add to that the possibility of the mother prioritizing her children, as any parent naturally would, disagreements over parenting choices, or feelings of exclusion within the home, and it creates a slow, steady erosion of emotional stability. The stepfather may begin to feel sidelined, unheard, or stripped of authority. In the minds of some individuals, especially those struggling with identity, control, or emotional regulation, this loss of status in the family can feel like a personal attack. Their role is diminished, their voice ignored, and their sense of power slipping. In that distorted emotional landscape, the children, innocent as they are, can come to represent what's wrong in the household, the source of imbalance, of disconnection, or even rejection. It's important to note that many family-related crimes are not committed out of hatred for the child, but out of a perceived loss of identity, status, or control. The child becomes a symbol of the person's declining relevance in the family dynamic. The result is not always planned or premeditated violence, but sometimes a sudden emotional breaking point, driven by years of built-up tension. In such environments, signs of emotional abuse may not be visible. There may be no bruises, no police reports, no loud fights. Neighbors say the family seemed normal. Teachers notice nothing unusual. Social media shows photos of smiling dinners and weekend outings. But beneath that surface can be a house filled with unspoken power struggles, emotional misalignment, and roles that feel increasingly irreconcilable. If the mother's emotional focus remained centered on the children, and if the stepfather had unmet needs for control, validation, or significance, then it's possible that frustration and jealousy grew over time. For someone already emotionally unstable or struggling with self-worth, that quiet isolation can become dangerously toxic, and no one around them may see the shift until it's far too late. In many family-related cases, the motive isn't always rooted in hatred or financial stress. Sometimes it stems from something far less visible, but just as powerful, a sense of emotional threat. In this case, it may be jealousy, not directed toward the mother, but toward the children's biological father. When a man takes on the role of a stepfather, he often steps into a space that has already been emotionally occupied, the place of father in both the hearts of the children and often in the memory of the mother. Whether or not the biological father remains present in the children's lives, his legacy, through memories, blood ties, or family stories, often lingers in the household as an invisible force the stepfather cannot easily displace. In some situations, the biological father still calls, sends gifts, visits occasionally, or is frequently mentioned in conversation. For a man with a strong sense of pride, possessiveness, or insecurity about his role in the family, this ongoing presence, however indirect, can feel like a constant reminder that he is, at best, second place. The feeling of being silently compared, even when unspoken, can lead the stepfather to feel like a perpetual outsider, a stand-in, a replacement who is never fully accepted. This emotional dynamic becomes more dangerous if the mother, unintentionally or not, fails to balance her words or affections. A single offhand remark such as, "Their father used to," may stir intense discomfort or even resentment in someone already sensitive about his position. As that sense of inferiority deepens, it can slowly extend to the children themselves, who, through no fault of their own, represent the living remnants of a past relationship. In some criminal cases, the stepfather begins to view the child as a symbol of what he cannot erase or control, the ongoing emotional ties between the mother and her past. This desire to eliminate the invisible rival may begin subtly through attempts to control the mother, restrict contact with the biological father, or assert dominance within the household. In more extreme cases, when psychological balance breaks down, that control can shift dangerously toward the children, who become, in the stepfather's mind, obstacles to complete emotional ownership. The path from jealousy to resentment to potentially violent behavior is well documented in criminal psychology. It's not always driven by traditional hatred, but rather by emotional instability pushed to the edge. When a man believes he can never fully claim the love of the woman he lives with because part of her heart still belongs to someone else and to the children they shared, he may perceive the act of removing that emotional history as a twisted form of release. That said, it is equally important to acknowledge another possibility. In countless blended families around the world, stepfathers have taken on their roles with patience, compassion, and genuine love. Living in the shadow of a previous relationship is not easy, and if the stepfather in this case has made sincere efforts to build bonds, support the household, and accept his role, then his silence and limited media presence should not be misread as avoidance or emotional distance. It is entirely possible that he is grieving in a way that is quiet, private, and unseen. And if he is indeed innocent, then the suspicion and speculation surrounding him may represent a second tragedy, one just as cruel as the first. Not every disappearance begins with a plan. In many domestic cases, tragedy doesn't stem from premeditated violence, but from an initial mistake, a moment of poor judgment, an unintended injury, and the desperate, often irrational decisions made afterward to cover it up. If we entertain the theory that the stepfather was involved, one scenario cannot be ignored. An unexpected incident occurred, perhaps a moment of anger, a physical gesture that went too far, or a disciplinary act that escalated beyond control. In such cases, the adult may not have intended to cause harm, but when confronted with the consequences, serious injury or even death, panic takes over. Rather than seek help, Some individuals, fearing arrest, disgrace, or the loss of their family, choose the worst possible option, to hide what happened. Not out of hatred or malice, but out of fear, shame, and desperation. This pattern has appeared in numerous real-world cases involving children. The person responsible for the injury wasn't necessarily a cold-blooded killer, but someone overwhelmed by fear of accountability. The decision to fabricate a story, stage a disappearance, or hide a body is not always the result of a long-term plan. It can be an impulsive response to the realization that things have gone horribly wrong. In these situations, what follows is often done quietly, with no clear strategy. There are no elaborate cover-ups, just frantic attempts to erase evidence, wiping surfaces, disposing of clothing, deleting data, or hiding incriminating items. The actions are clumsy, panicked, and driven by the single goal of avoiding the truth. In the context of Lilly and Jack's case, this scenario has been quietly discussed on forums and among online communities, that something may have happened inside the home and that someone close to them chose concealment over confession. If a serious accident did occur, then the calm demeanor, limited media presence, and controlled cooperation that followed could be interpreted not as innocence, but as an attempt to maintain the version of events established in those first few crucial hours. That said, not everyone reacts this way. Many people faced with an accident involving a child have done the right thing, called for help, admitted fault, and accepted the legal consequences. So, if the stepfather in this case is innocent, then any speculation around post-accident concealment remains just that, a theory, not a judgment. Still, given his proximity to the children and his access to them in private, such a possibility is reasonable to explore within any serious investigation. Because sometimes the truth behind a disappearance doesn't lie in long-term malice, but in a single moment of panic, followed by a cascade of irreversible decisions. In many family-related cases, one motive that is less frequently discussed, but chillingly plausible, is the desire to walk away from a relationship without taking its consequences along. In the case of a stepfather, this might mean wanting to leave the mother, but not wanting to remain tied to, support, or be legally or emotionally responsible for her two children. When a man enters a relationship where children are already present, the burden is not only financial or practical, it also includes legal and social obligations. He cannot easily disengage without appearing heartless or being judged by others. In some cases, if the couple is legally married, the stepfather may even face obligations such as child support, legal liabilities, or long-term consequences once the relationship ends. For someone who longs to start over, this can feel like a significant barrier. If he is already experiencing exhaustion, disillusionment, or emotional detachment, the desire to cut loose can begin to grow quietly. And if that desire builds up over time, unspoken and unresolved, it may evolve into something more extreme. From a behavioral analysis perspective, there have been cases in which the perpetrator had no history of violence, no financial motive, and no overt animosity, but simply wanted to disappear from their role in the family, yet feared the legal or social fallout of doing so openly through divorce or abandonment. In such circumstances, a distorted logic may emerge. If the children, representing the clearest living ties to this relationship, no longer exist, then the past itself could be erased. If the stepfather in this case ever felt that family life had become a trap or an endless cycle of responsibility, then eliminating the evidence of that role might, in his mind, seem like the only escape. In several real cases, individuals who acted out of this motive went on to start new lives, moved to different towns, or resumed normal routines, as if nothing had happened. What eventually raised suspicion was not visible grief, but the absence of it. They appeared too calm, too detached, as though they had stepped out of a role they had never wanted to play in the first place. Returning to the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, if the stepfather had harbored a deep desire to disengage from his family role, but feared the consequences of doing so, then orchestrating the disappearance of the children, by whatever means, might be interpreted not as an act of aggression, but as one of absolute avoidance. Cold, quiet, final. In family-related cases involving internal conflict, there exists a particularly dangerous and often under-recognized motive, a pathological need for absolute control. This is not impulsive violence, nor is it strictly financial or emotional despair. It stems from a deep-seated belief that everything around the person must conform to their expectations, and if it cannot be controlled, then it must be eliminated. If the theory that the stepfather was involved holds any weight, then one psychological factor worth considering is a pre-existing need for control. In behavioral analysis, individuals with control issues often express it through attempts to dominate family dynamics, dictating how the children behave, how the partner parents them, and how the household operates overall. Even minor acts of resistance from a child, talking back, refusing a request, or expressing defiance, can be interpreted as threats to that control. This mindset tends to escalate when the individual feels their voice is being diminished, ignored by the partner, dismissed by the children, or undermined within the family. For some, especially those with unresolved emotional trauma or poor coping mechanisms, a perceived loss of control, even in a small moment, can trigger an extreme emotional response. Many real-life cases begin from such tipping points. A child says something the adult finds disrespectful. A look is interpreted as defiance. A normal behavioral challenge becomes a symbol of the adult's eroding authority. For those with rigid worldviews and unstable self-worth, these moments don't just feel like conflict. They feel like a collapse of identity. In the specific case of Lilly and Jack, if the stepfather had come to feel that he had lost control over the children, over his relationship, over the household, then someone with a disordered psychological framework might conclude that removing the source of chaos is the only way to restore control. What makes this psychological profile particularly concerning is its outward calm. Individuals with a deep need for control often present as composed, measured, even disciplined, until they no longer feel in command. And when that tipping point comes, their response can be shockingly cold, methodical, and emotionally detached. To them, losing control is the ultimate threat, and eliminating the uncontrollable is the only solution they understand. Of course, not all stepfathers exhibit this behavior. Many play vital, positive roles in blended families, navigating emotional complexity with patience, compromise, and empathy. But in certain rare cases, when a person lacks the tools to process loss of authority or emotional ambiguity, their need to reassert control, through extreme means, must be considered a possibility in any thorough investigation. In the realm of domestic crime, not all acts stem from motives like money, power, or direct conflict. Sometimes the reason is far more personal and internal, the desire to protect one's honor, or to hide something so shameful in the perpetrator's mind that it must never come to light. In societies where personal image, reputation, and the illusion of a normal family are highly valued, even the threat of exposure, a mistake, a scandal, a past transgression, can be enough to push someone toward a drastic and irreversible action to cover it up. If we assume, hypothetically, that the stepfather was involved in the disappearance of Lilly and Jack, one possibility that cannot be ignored is that he was hiding something, an action, a relationship, or a behavior, that he believed would destroy his image or position in the eyes of his family or community if revealed. It might have been a history of abuse, an incident with one of the children, or something personal, drug use, a prior conviction, inappropriate behavior, that, if uncovered during a police investigation, would permanently damage his role, career, or trust within the family. And if the children knew, or could become evidence of, that secret, then in a fearful, irrational mind, removing the threat might seem like the only way to preserve control. In cases like this, the perpetrator often has no prior criminal record, no visible psychological disorder. They are normal, quiet, responsible, until a crisis exposes the darker truth they've been hiding. These are people who may fear shame more than they fear punishment. People who might be willing to face legal consequences if it means their secret stays buried. When a person with this kind of mindset sees the children, innocent though they may be, as potential witnesses, liabilities, or risks to their carefully curated persona, then those children may become, in their mind, something to be contained. This is one of the hardest motives to detect, because it doesn't leave obvious traces like rage or greed. It's not about a visible argument, a custody dispute, or a financial burden. It's about deep-seated fear. Fear of being seen for who they truly are, of losing the carefully constructed identity they live behind. And for some, that fear becomes so overwhelming that it leads to an unthinkable, calculated act, one they frame as self-preservation rather than harm. What may appear to outsiders as a horrifying act of cruelty could, in the perpetrator's mind, be seen as a desperate way to protect the one thing they value above all else: the illusion of control, respect, and personal image. The 7 parts of analysis above were never intended to assign guilt, declare a perpetrator, or steer public opinion toward any particular suspect. They are logical hypotheses presented within the framework of a theoretical investigative scenario designed to explore claims that have circulated widely on social media, specifically the theory that if the stepfather were indeed involved, what possible motives could exist, and what psychological dynamics might apply in that context. We've examined several possibilities: financial strain, emotional conflict, jealousy toward the biological father, attempts to cover up an accident, evasion of responsibility, obsession with control, and fear of disgrace. Each of these has been documented in real-life criminal cases, and each could plausibly emerge under certain conditions. But possibility does not mean actuality, and most importantly, no hypothesis can substitute for verified evidence, because in true criminal investigations, theory is a tool for direction, not for condemnation. As of now, there has been no official statement from authorities naming the stepfather as a suspect. On the contrary, he has participated in interviews, cooperated with law enforcement, and shown no clear signs of evasion in front of the media. If he is indeed innocent, then being subjected to suspicion, public scrutiny, and judgment based solely on unverified narratives is a second form of suffering, one that is especially cruel because it often leaves no room for defense. In real investigations, patience and accuracy are non-negotiable principles. Public opinion may grow impatient. Media coverage may add pressure. But justice cannot afford haste. Wrongfully condemning an innocent person not only destroys their dignity, it can also give the real perpetrator more time to remain hidden. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan remains unsolved. And until concrete evidence surfaces, until facts are verified through transparent legal procedures, every suspicion must remain a theory. A necessary theory, perhaps, but never one to replace the truth. Regardless of where the investigation ultimately leads, regardless of who may or may not be involved, the most important truth remains unchanged. These 2 children must be found. No analysis, no rumor, no speculation, no matter how thorough, can take the place of real action. And for that reason, the most vital task remains: to keep searching, to keep asking the right questions, and to never give up hope.